going to be recording this webinar, and we will share it with all of you on our YouTube channel, which I'll talk about in just a minute. Let's give another 1 minute, and then we'll start with the slides. Let's see, we have 22 people on at this point. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and open this up. We'll start with some of the score slides, and then we'll get right into the topic of the day. So for those of you who are not familiar with SCORE, these will be really good slides for you to pay attention to. And for those who have heard it before, hang in there. It's only a 5-minute kind of promo for SCORE. First of all, SCORE is a national organization, and it's all about helping small businesses grow and be successful in their business venture. Before we start going into that, I just want to do a few housekeeping tips. One is that we are in a webinar, so I'd like everyone to make sure that they are muted and that you understand that you will not be able to speak directly to the presenter today, but you will be able to put any of your questions or ideas in the chat box, and I will be reading them to her all throughout her presentation. So she is going to take questions at any time during her talk. And then I'd also like to have you share your name, your website, and your business in the chat box. We find this useful for all the attendees, that they get to know each other a little bit, and I can also make sure that this is shared back to you after the webinar is concluded. I'd also love to know if you're working with a SCORE mentor today and who that mentor is, so that we can let them know that you attended this webinar. And then finally, we will be recording this. It will be available on our YouTube channel in a few days. We've had some issues with editing the versions, so please give us at least 3 to 5 business days to put that up on the YouTube channel, and I will show you how to get onto that in just a minute. And so again, remember, any of your questions, put it in the chat box, not the Q&A. Chat box allows everybody who's on this webinar to see your questions, where the Q&A only lets me do that. To kick us off, I wanted just to remind you about some of the other SCORE webinars that the Northwest chapter, which is the chapter that I am chair of, it's for Morristown, Warren, and Essex counties. And so we actually put on 2 webinars a month. And in April, we've kicked off a series called Starting a Business. And we're going to do a deep dive into operational planning. We're also going to do in April a deeper dive into payroll and taxes that small businesses in New Jersey need to be made aware of. And then on May 5th, we are going to do a deep dive into creating your winning value proposition, which has always been one of our most popular webinars to date. And then on the late May 26th, right before Memorial Day, we're going to do a deep dive into how to start a nonprofit business. What are some of the key regulatory? How do you actually register your business? And this person that's presenting that topic has been working with nonprofit businesses for 2.5 decades. So they really understand what goes on here in New Jersey and how to get that done. So what is SCORE? And who is SCORE? As I said, we're a national volunteer organization that is part of the SBA. We have over 13,000 volunteer retired professionals, most of them are retired, with such diverse industry experience. So if you have a question about regulatory, legal, finance, almost anything, we're going to be able to find a mentor across the United States that can help you solve that question or issue that you have. And the other cool thing about SCORE is that we work for the life of your business. You could just have an idea. You could be at the point where you want to sell your business. SCORE has the mentoring expertise to help you work through all of those different types of issues, given the life stage of your business. And all of the advice that we give you, coaching, mentoring, is completely free. Your SCORE mentor will never charge you, unlike some other resources that are out there. and they will be able to guide you through all the variety of issues that you face when you're leading a small business. And what you can expect, I said free, which is really important, but we're also confidential. We sign an ethics code with the government, the federal government, that we will not share your information with anyone else. And if we do have 2 or 3 mentors on your call, remember they've all signed this code of ethics. We have unlimited mentoring. We can meet with you once a week, once a day, if that's what you want for a while, once a month, whatever it is that you need, and you can come and go. You don't have to have every month you're meeting with your mentor. And I'd really like to stress the importance of mentoring. Folks, small businesses that have mentors are typically much more successful than those that try to do it all on their own or just try to get ideas from families and friends. So it's really important that you know these are experienced professionals. We will work with you if you have an idea, thinking of starting a business, not sure if it's an idea that would make it. How do you monetize it? We also work with you're opening a new business to managing an existing business, growing that business, particularly in this time with the pandemic and what's going to happen as we all move out of it. And then, as I said before, the sale of your business if you'd like to exit at this point. So how do you find a mentor? It's really, really easy. You go to www.score.org. That's the national organization. There's a button right on the top that says find a mentor. You press that, you put in your zip code, and you will be contacted by the chapter according to your zip code on a mentor that would love to work with you. Or if you prefer to go to my chapter, which is the email below, www.northwestnewjersey.score, again, we have a button called Find Your Mentor, or you can contact me and I'll make sure that you get into the system correctly. And my name is Nancy Shea at scorevolunteer.org. Let's go on to, we always need mentors. I'd like to put a plug in here for those of you in your small businesses that are at the point to give back. This is a really wonderful and fulfilling experience. I've been doing this for 3 years. I've probably mentored over 40 to 50 different clients in that 3-year period. So it's not like a small group that you work with. You get a lot of diversity in the types of businesses that you would help coach and mentor with. You will be able to work not only as a mentor, but putting on webinars like you're attending today. You will be working in outreach, which is developing community partnerships that will actually not only bring us clients, but possibly recruit mentors to be in a chapter. And then, of course, we have very small fundraising initiatives that go on. So if you are interested, just even to learn more, please give me a shout, and you can reach me at www.northwestnewjersey.score.org, or our membership chairman is Stephen.Perlman@scorevolunteer.org. Steve is a great guy, really easy to talk to. We get a lot of folks that want to just, ask a few questions to see if it's something that they would like to do. Very willing to do that. So you need to check it out so that when you volunteer, you really want to do this. And lastly, I'd like to tell you we've really done a lot with social media, particularly for our chapter. And you can find us at Score Northwest New Jersey on Facebook or on LinkedIn. Again, it's Score-Northwest New Jersey. We also have a new YouTube channel, and you will find it under Score Northwest New Jersey. That's where the recording for this webinar will be placed as early as next week. Give us a few days to edit it. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our speaker today is Amy Karson, and she has a wonderful business in New Jersey that is for bookkeeping. And I'd like her to introduce and give a little background on herself and also about the topic that she will share with you today. So with that, Amy, you can take it away.
Great. Thank you, Nancy. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very thrilled to be here today. I also want to give a quick plug to Score. I have been using 2 Score mentors over the course of the past 6 months, and they've been wildly invaluable in helping me plan out my marketing and business development strategy, and it's been a fabulous experience. So I'm truly thrilled to be here today, and I've had a really positive experience with Score thus far. I'm just going to share my screen. Today, we are going to be discussing the impact of good bookkeeping on your business success. And I run an outsourced accounting firm, with an emphasis on bookkeeping. The name of my firm is Brand K Partners, and we effectively offer outsourced accounting to small organizations. The majority of my client base actually is nonprofit organizations. And we really serve as an outsourced bookkeeper slash controller slash CFO all rolled into one. And as I go through my presentation today, I'm actually going to focus on the different roles because I think it's really important. So I can maybe touch on that a bit more later. But the majority of the organizations that work with us, they typically will require roughly half a day to 1 day per week of bookkeeping and accounting services. The majority of the work is bookkeeping, but there is, and I actually feel it's such a crucial role that very frequently is not affordable for many small organizations. We will provide CFO level guidance, strategic work, budget work, audit management, forecasting, just some of the higher level tasks that are very crucial, especially right now. Just a little bit about me. I started Brand K Partners. It's been about 8 years now. We are, like I said, a full service bookkeeping and financial management firm. I am a financial analyst. I was trained at IBM and UBS. I am very, very passionate about helping small businesses in particular grow and prosper. And I'm very passionate about helping small businesses and small business owners or nonprofit executives that are not necessarily finance people learn how to understand finance. So the majority of my clients are actually social workers or teachers or I was actually trying to quickly look at the chat before to see who's coming in, but people that have a passion or a specific skill and therefore they start a business, but don't necessarily have the business background or acumen or training to be able to manage the business. And I think the financial ends of the business at least. And I think right now, especially we've seen with the pandemic, just having some basic tools and some basic understanding or concepts at your disposal can be just wildly helpful in pivoting and making strategic decisions. So today, the agenda, we're actually going to cover quite a bit, but I'm going to try to, I know that we have a diverse crowd on the call, different backgrounds, different skill sets. I'm going to keep this as high level as possible. And I'm going to try to throw out some tips across multiple different areas. I know Nancy mentioned this before, but I do want to reiterate, please, if there are questions, please put them into the chat. I very much welcome questions as we go through. I think this will make this a lot more enjoyable for everyone. So please stop me with questions. But I think just some of the key items that we're going to be discussing today, as I mentioned before, the roles, the different roles within an accounting and finance team, accounting infrastructure, the key tasks performed by accountants on a weekly basis, some tools that will be really helpful for small businesses in order to streamline and automate some of these functions. We're going to very briefly and at a high level review 3 financial statements that I use with my clients on a monthly basis and I think are wildly helpful. And then we're going to walk through a few key metrics that I think are like, if you take away anything from this call, it's understanding these 3 metrics and how to plan and think about this moving forward. And at the end, we are going to wrap up with any final questions that may arise. So just moving right along. So accounting roles. So I think, and if I'm to be completely honest, the biggest mistake that I've made over the past 8 years in building my business is it took me a very long time to understand that a bookkeeper cannot do everything. And I see this with my clients all the time. The bookkeeping role, that is very much a transactional role. So we frequently, the bookkeepers that we hire, these are very frequently, undergraduate accounting degrees, 1 to 3, maybe even no prior experience, 0 to 3 years of accounting experience. Frequently, these individuals, they are trained bookkeepers, or they're certified in QuickBooks, and they're very much, the entire focus is transactional. So these individuals will process bills, pay bills, run payroll, process accounts receivable, maybe assist with some collections, but this is the most junior role in the accounting function. And I think that this can be very confusing because I will very frequently hear from my clients, and even just my own misconception. I would expect a bookkeeper to be able to do everything, to present financial statements and to understand financial statements. But I do think it's important just to respect that a bookkeeper is typically a pretty transactional role. That being said, some key traits of a good bookkeeper, I would say, and this is what we test for, this individual must be able to pay, very close attention to detail. That's like the number one thing that we look for in this, because this individual will be processing multiple transactions on a daily basis. A step above a bookkeeper is a controller. And the controller it can be a controller, it can be a senior accountant. The controller, this individual is typically responsible for management of the bookkeeper. This individual is responsible for establishing internal controls, which is honestly almost laughable with a small business. So very frequently, a small business is really only able to afford a bookkeeper or someone more junior, and the ability to have internal controls and establish them is very difficult. And what I mean by internal controls is it's really great to have checks and balances. So we like to say that the person who's actually managing the books and physically managing the tracking of accounting transactions should not be the individual who's touching money, should not be the individual who is making bank deposits or processing payroll or signing checks. It's in a small business where it's only a few people, that's very, very challenging, which is why, quite frankly, I frequently feel that that's a huge benefit of outsourcing the function, because you will just naturally have that check and balance and that divide. But internal controls is a big area of management, typically for a controller type function. This individual may help with budget planning, will help with reviews or audits for larger organizations. They'll do a formal monthly close and reconciliation of the books and cash flow forecasting and management. Now, I recognize that once again, for a small business, you're not going to be able frequently to hire a full-time controller. The point I make by just highlighting the roles is, once again, just to understand what each skill level is typically capable of and should be responsible for. We like to say that a controller or a senior accountant typically has at least 5 years of accounting experience, and is really, once again, the primary role here is oversight of the accounting function.
Hey, Amy, we've been asked, could you please go to slideshow mode so the slide is bigger?
Oh, sure. One sec. One sec. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So then the final role within the accounting department is a CFO. And this individual is responsible for the whole thing, the accounting side and also the finance side, which is a lot of strategy. It's a planning role. It's a strategic role. They're part of the executive team. And this individual is really is reviewing the work, of course, and reviewing the accounting function, but is an integral part in helping build out and plan and work with the organization moving forward. So in my own experience for my firm, the majority of organizations that we work with, that I'm sure are comparable in size to who is on the phone right now, we typically work with small to mid-size organizations that have annual budgets anywhere from $250,000 to $5 million. And organizations in this bracket typically cannot you don't necessarily have the ability to hire, or it's impossible to hire all of these different functions. So it's really important that if you are to hire, there's an option to outsource where you would kind of get this all rolled into one, or if you are to hire in-house, it's really important to just understand the different areas of focus here. And really, when vetting someone, like a great candidate for this type of role is like to come in and help manage the accounting function of a small business is someone that has all of these different skills, and really can kind of perform all of this in one, which is a little hard to find, but it's definitely, which is why I find that outsourcing can be a really great option. There we go. I do want to talk about, one sec. Okay. So accounting infrastructure. So very frequently when we come into an organization, the accounting is being managed in Excel, via Excel spreadsheets. And I think that's very, very common. So the one key takeaway for any of you who are potentially managing your books this way, I'm a big advocate of QuickBooks. We tend to use QuickBooks Online. The big difference between QuickBooks and QuickBooks Online, there's a little less functionality in QuickBooks Online, but it's a great tool. It enables multiple users, which is really helpful. So we will have an ID, our client will have an ID, whoever's preparing taxes will have an ID. So it's great, and it's all cloud-based. And so I'm a big advocate of QuickBooks Online. Another great general ledger system that I know a lot of people use, especially small business, is Xero, Xero. That also is a very helpful system. And these online systems will, once again, they will enable you to be able to track all of the different transactions of the organization. And now it's really important once you establish the accounting, once you establish and purchase the accounting software, the way that you set up the system is really of the utmost importance. There are different ways to track transactions, and different ways to slice the data. So there's what's called a chart of accounts. So this is really the backbone of the general ledger system. So this is really a listing of all of the different revenue types and expenses. So you would include travel and meals, and revenue, you would include sales or one-time sales. So it's really important to create and set up a chart of accounts that makes sense for your specific business. If you are to go purchase QuickBooks Online, there will be a dummy chart of accounts already in there, but it's worth focusing and spending some time and thinking about how you think of your business and then how you want to see reports on a monthly basis. So I can just give a very quick example. Revenue is really, and how people look at revenue, it's really important to, it's frequently very important to groups. So I like, for my own business, I like to see, for a lot of our clients, they're on monthly retainers. So I have a line, one of my revenue lines is monthly retainer income. I have other clients on quarterly retainers. Another one of my revenue lines is quarterly retainers and things of that nature. So setting up the chart of accounts is really, really important. QuickBooks also has a function called classes. So this is another layer or another attribute whereby we can code information, and then we can track accordingly. So a lot of people will like to track their different departments. This would be a great place. Each department can be its own class. So then every time you would book a transaction, for example, program A, there was a travel expense to program A, for that specific transaction, you would book it to travel program A, meals program B. The goal is that you really want, once again, going back to my point about bookkeeping is an exercise in paying attention to detail. If you want to see it all come, ensuring that your coding is accurate will then, in the long run, help you maintain and review financial reports that make sense and are clean and clear. Another function within QuickBooks, there's a location function. So if you're a small business that has multiple locations, you can also, once again, track by location. It just to kind of drive the point home, it's very important that every time you're booking a transaction, you ensure that you book to the specific location that you want to see. There's also jobs and customers, and same thing. Every time you book transactions, it's how much detail do you want to get into? And depending on the small business and your needs, QuickBooks Online, or really any of these online software platforms, will really enable you to slice and dice and view your data in a whole bunch of different ways. It all just comes down to the coding and making sure that you're actually, if you're going to set up the infrastructure correctly, making sure that you actually track against that appropriately. Nancy, I'm going to pause here. Are there any questions?
There is. How well do QuickBooks and Xero integrate with CRM systems?
Oh, I love that question. They actually typically integrate relatively seamlessly. I know Salesforce, and actually I can't speak to Xero as much as I can to QuickBooks Online. QuickBooks Online and Salesforce, that's just the prime example. There is a very clear sync and integration process. You can set it up front, and then literally you can set it up so that the systems talk to one another every night. Once again, I work with a lot of nonprofit organizations. There are tools like Donor Perfect, Razor's Edge syncs up to another, but most of the nonprofit CRM databases that I work with, it's exactly the same thing. There's a nightly sync between the two, and it's relatively seamless. So I do just want to, setting up your accounting infrastructure is fantastic, and it's really important, and it's the backbone of everything that you are effectively going to do. But once again, if you set it up and then don't use it properly and aren't properly coding, it's not going to do very much for you. So I always say that garbage in equals garbage out. So it's really, really, really important to focus on coding and to spend time analyzing and making sure that all of your credit card charges are going where they should be going, and that all of your receipts that come in are being booked to the appropriate revenue lines. So I do just want to stress that point. And very frequently, I would argue, some of the biggest bookkeeping issues that we see are frequent bookkeeper turnover. If a lot of times, if you have one we will come into a situation where we will see multiple customers, like by the same customer listed in 6 different ways. And so every time a transaction is booked for that customer, it's booked to a slightly different customer name. So the name of my firm is Brand K Partners, for example. I will frequently you could see my name listed as Brand K, then Brand K Partners, then Brand, and you see what I mean. So it's really important that it's clean and that we're booking consistently to the same lines, and that when there is bookkeeper turnover, that we understand how things were booked in the past and that we book consistently. The same thing with a chart of accounts. That's frequently like the number one thing that when I am hired, I have to come in and fix, because there will be 8 different travel lines that are effectively, they all mean the same thing, but different bookkeepers like to book to different travel lines. So consistency, coding, this is all really, really, really important. And low turnover in this function is really important. Bookkeeping is not, once again, I work with nonprofits frequently, but bookkeeping is not a place for a volunteer. A great place to have a volunteer is to help with a budget, to help with a forecast, to help with the strategy work, or maybe even the oversight work. But the bookkeeping space, you want a paid professional who knows what they're doing, and can really manage the detail and coding. And there's also, quite frankly, there's lots of opportunities, and I'm going to go through some in a bit, but there's lots of opportunities to sync systems. The CRM is a perfect example. There's also with bill pay and expense management. So there's so many ways to streamline things so that we don't have to run into these types of issues. I do just want to run through some of the, very quickly, some of the typical accounting tasks, just for those of you who are not familiar. The biggest is accounts payable. This is bill payments. For small businesses, we typically suggest that bills are paid are reviewed and paid once every 2 weeks. Lately, for a lot of groups that we're working with, we have found this to be honestly a bit challenging, and simply due to cash management. So if you are in a situation where you are struggling with cash, we've worked with our clients, and we have a prioritization mechanism. We try to pay those that are due quickly as soon as possible, but if we have to, we push out payments until cash comes in. And this is the accounts receivable, which is my next item here. This is huge. I will very frequently walk into situations where I will see outstanding invoices 60, 90, 120 days. We're small businesses. We need to get paid, and we need to get paid quickly. So very frequently, one of the first things I will do with my clients is set up like a very, very simple collection system. And this is where using a general ledger system like QuickBooks Online is great, because if you're keeping up with your receivables on a weekly basis, there's literally a report in QuickBooks Online that you can pull. And at the click of a button, you can see your open accounts receivable. And then within QuickBooks Online, you can actually even go in and you can send email reminders directly to the clients. So this in and of itself, just a little gentle nudge, can be very helpful, and can be very helpful in receiving quick and timely payments. And for those who are struggling to pay bills, I would recommend in this current environment, a weekly. I know for my own business, we follow up on open accounts receivable every single week. And the minute anything is over 30 days, we instantly take action with emails and phone calls. And I would say just managing that process, it's like because it's so streamlined and systematized, it's roughly an hour a week. So we never really have anything outstanding. So just staying on top of this, quite frankly, can mean for several businesses, can mean whether or not you stay in business. So it's like the most critical thing that you as a small business owner can do is stay on top of your accounts receivable. And I will say that people are very, in my experience at least, kind of just playing the small business card, like, hey, I'm a small business, like just like you, I need to get paid on time, or I can't pay my employees and my family. We rely on this. People are typically pretty responsive. And I will say that I will put holds on client accounts, which has also been a very effective tool, that if I am not paid on time, within 30 days, we stop work on the account until there's some payment plan in place or we understand what's going on. So I think that's really important. Once again, there's a formal way within QuickBooks Online and Xero to do bank and credit card reconciliations. So it's a formal process within the system whereby you go in, and it's absolutely important that the bank balance at the end of each month in your bank account matches the balance in QuickBooks Online or Xero. And if they don't match, which they almost always will never match because of outstanding payments and checks that have not been deposited, it's just important to understand why. So this is a function that needs to happen every month and really should happen within the general ledger system. Payroll. We always tell people, please do not do payroll yourselves. We are an outsourced accounting firm. We will not do payroll. There are many third-party external payroll providers that specialize in this, and the tax laws are changing all the time for every state. And so having a professional third-party payroll provider manage this is of the utmost importance. Honestly, I'm sure there are good providers out there. My firm, we use ADP for the most part. That's been fine. I know Paychex is also available. There's a new payroll provider out there called Gusto, Gusto. A lot of my clients have actually gone on to that recently, and that's been great. A lot of times you can get benefits through these payroll providers for your business. So if you're going to do nothing else, outsource your payroll. Don't try to do it yourself. Don't try to do the payroll tax filings yourself. It's a mess, and the rules change all the time. And then the last thing is the month-end close process. So it is very important. And this is a task, once again, going back to my 3 roles of accounting within an organization. The month-end close process is typically something that's handled by a slightly more senior person than a bookkeeper, because this is really a double check on the bookkeeper's work. So this is going in and making sure that all of the coding is accurate, that you're looking at, and we're going to get into this a bit more, you're looking at the balance sheet and making sure that the balance sheet balances make sense and that they're consistent. You're looking at month-to-month trends, and you're making sure that all of the bills have been entered in the system. A great example of this is we have a lot of organizations that we work with. We won't, and even for my own company, we don't receive a monthly rent invoice. And so therefore, if there's no prompt within the system, or if there's no prompt to remember, is my point. There's no formal prompt in the form of an invoice to actually remember to pay rent every month. So if I'm closing out a month of financial statements and I'm looking at the current month expenses versus the prior month expenses, I will very quickly see that there's rent was paid in one month and not the other. So what's the cause? So this whole month end close process, it's a double check, it's a quality control, it's an analysis. And it's very frequently too advanced for a bookkeeper to also, who's a transactional person typically, to be able to manage this as well.
And
so I'm going to pause here, Nancy. Yeah.
Who do you recommend to do the month-end close for a small business?
That's a really great question. So I think if you can only hire a bookkeeper, this might be, if you have a board of advisors or someone that helps you with finance acumen, this might be a great place for that individual. This is, once again, why I'm a big advocate of outsourcing. If you outsource, you will be assigned a team typically with someone that has this higher level skill. You will have a bookkeeper on your team and also a more senior person kind of reviewing the books. If you choose to hire, I would hire someone more at the senior accountant controller level who has the ability to do the transactional, but also review the work. But it's typically a double check on the work is typically a little too much for a bookkeeper. Frequently, I should also mention, a lot of times, I know a lot of small businesses will also use the individual who does their taxes. They will have that individual also review the work of the bookkeeper, maybe not on a monthly basis, but even a quarterly basis is more than appropriate, and will effectively provide financial statements. That could also be a really good alternative.
Okay, thanks.
So going back to system automation and streamlining, so just some accounting tools that I love. So we use a system called bill.com now with all of our clients. This is an accounts payable. This is an online accounts payable system. So the days of handwriting checks or even printing checks out of QuickBooks Online or out of the system, those are I would say kind of over at this point. And particularly in the pandemic where we have all been remote, very quickly switching all of our clients onto bill.com was like an absolute godsend. So bill.com, it's an online portal. And what happens is if you sign up, you will then get your company will get a bill.com email address, and all of your vendor invoices you will tell all of your vendors to email them directly to this email address, or once a month, or once a week, or once every 2 weeks, you will formally upload or email all of your bills into this email portal. And then it's fantastic. You then can go in, it syncs with QuickBooks Online. So you then have the ability to go into the system. You look at all of your bills on a weekly basis or a bi-weekly basis. You can actually review them. You can code them based on your coding and your setup within QuickBooks Online. And then it's great from an internal controls perspective because there's a whole approval chain. So what we do with a lot of our clients is I will have the bookkeeper on the team. So someone on the client side will upload the bills into bill.com. I will then have a bookkeeper on my team go in and code all of the bills and make sure that the coding is consistent. It syncs with QuickBooks Online. And I will then we will then kick the bills over to the client. And so the president of the organization can then, this can be done just, it's an app on your phone. You can quickly go in and just hit approve, 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 approve. And upon approver, I will then have the controller on my team go in and physically pay the bills. The bills can't actually be paid until someone on the client side has gone in and approved. And so it's great because you have multiple people touching. So there's the internal control perspective. And it syncs with QuickBooks Online. So at the end of every day, Bill.com does a formal sync and it all goes over. And this is completely paperless. Vendors can be paid electronically, or they can also be paid via check, but it's all done through Bill.com. The next is Expensify. So this is an expense management system. So this is for credit cards and debit cards. This is also a fantastic tool that syncs with QuickBooks Online. And it's also like Bill.com, it's an app on your phone. So when this is set up, Expensify will sync with both QuickBooks Online and it will sync with your actual credit card account. So every time you make a credit card purchase, an expense will pop up on your phone. You will go in, you can take a picture of the receipt. You can also code the expense to the specific line based on how your QuickBooks is set up, and then it syncs. And so at the end of every month, or at the end actually of every month, you will have this great report in Expensify that has all of your purchases, all of the coding, and all of your receipts. And you can literally click one button and then all of that information goes right into QuickBooks Online. So auditors love this, tax preparers love this because everything's in one place and it's nice and clean. I also like to throw out Vena. This is honestly for slightly larger organizations, and it's just something great to know about. This is an online budgeting, planning, forecasting tool. I'm not going to go into it too much, but as you continue to grow, I do just want to make everyone aware of this because this is like the premier tool in business planning. And now as my own business is growing, I've been using this a bit and I just think it's fantastic. But once again, for quick fixes and for smaller organization, Bill.com and Expensify are great tools. I should say there's also another Expensify, a competitor to Expensify is a tool called Concur, C-O-N-C-U-R. It's also the same idea, same functionality.
Amy, we have a question. It's from Paul, and Paul is asking, how big of a business, and defined as the number of invoices, number of customers, revenues, etc., do you need to get the return on investment on these systems? I am concerned about the monthly expense of QuickBooks Online plus a CRM. These sound like lots of expenses.
Yeah. So QuickBooks Online, typically, I think right now, and you can get some discounts depending on what type of business you are. QuickBooks Online costs, I would say roughly, probably, I think on average, it depends on what, somewhere between $50 to $90 per month. If you were to actually go buy QuickBooks itself, that would also be fine. That's roughly $300 per year. Xero, I believe, is actually drastically less expensive. I do just want to make a point though, for a lot of our really small businesses, they're using QuickBooks Online as their CRM tool. So we're entering all the customer information. I mean, honestly, for my own business, I'm using QuickBooks Online as my own CRM tool. I think there comes a point where, and I honestly, I can't say based on size, I would say transaction volume really matters. I think QuickBooks Online, and for a lot of small businesses, is completely appropriate as a CRM tool. Bill.com, the majority of my clients, I would say the cost is somewhere between $50 to $100 per month. And that includes the cost of effectively of postage and it's all in, and electronic payments. And Expensify, it's the same thing. I believe it's roughly $20 to $40 per month, depending on the subscription you use. So yeah, you're looking at a few $100s per month if you were to implement all of them. And I would argue that it's a necessity for, at least in my experience, the number of hours it saves just makes it a necessity for an organization at any size. Vena is on, once again, it's for larger businesses. This is a multi-$1,000 investment, but the others are really for, they're geared towards startup organizations.
Thank you.
So I do just want to, very briefly, and I am aware of time. I do just want to walk through a few of the key financial statements that I think are just important. And this is coming out of, and this is also another reason why I think it's so imperative to use a general ledger system such as Xero or QuickBooks, is that it enables you, just at the click of a button, you can run hundreds of reports once the books are actually formally closed every month. So this is just a very, very basic profit and loss statement. And so I should just mention profit and loss, it really looks at your revenues and expenses for a specific point in time. So this example, this is from January through December of 2018. And this is looking at income during that period, cost of goods sold during that period, expenses during that period. And so this is a year-to-date profit and loss. This is very helpful so that you can see how your business did. As a small business, obviously the goal is to turn a profit. So you're going to look at the bottom line, you're going to look at the net income number. I think it's very helpful to look. I like to, for all of our clients, we will always pull this. We will do this year to date. So for example, we just closed February books for most of our clients. So we will show this one screen and it will be January through February. So this is the total year to date. I think it's also really important to look at this monthly. We will then show our clients one column that shows January's numbers and one column that shows February's numbers. I think it's important to look line to line to look for consistencies. I gave the rent example before to make sure that rent one month is $0 and the other month is $4,000. So looking at this month to month is great. And I know before when I started up this conversation, I was talking about general accounting infrastructure. And I was saying that we can set this up so we can review reports in many different ways. You can run a profit and loss by customer. This is actually an exercise that I did for my own company a couple of years back. And I very quickly realized that I had a few customers where I wasn't making any money. I was effectively paying them to do the work. So I think it's really important if you're going to invest the time and energy in tracking your transactions and tracking the detail on a weekly basis, the end result are these great reports that help you analyze your business and help you understand the decisions that you're making and see if they actually make sense. You can also run a report by project or by job even. So for example, you can run a report for a customer, and then let's say you have 5 different projects going on with them. You can then look at the profitability of each specific project and see how you're doing. And it's really all very automated and sliced and diced very nicely. So I think if you're going to go through the trouble of setting up an accounting infrastructure and managing the infrastructure on a weekly basis, a great thing, the whole benefit of doing all of this is to have the outputs, which are these reports, which enable us to review and track and make key strategic decisions. So something that I did at the end of last year was, if it enables you to think about, which I did myself, is it time to raise our rates? Do we need to raise our rates because our profit margins aren't high enough? It really enables you to make the key strategic decisions that are necessary to run your business if you have the data all in a clean, clear, concise system. Another just key report, and this is actually, I pulled this off of, it's chanu.org, but QuickBooks Online, the report will look a little bit different. But I think the number one thing that I like to look at with many of my clients is a budget versus actuals report. So I should mention this too. It's really important at the beginning of every year or at the end of each year to set a budget. The budget will go stale very, very quickly, but it's really important to set a budget and then to measure yourself against that budget and then look at any variances. So we, like I said, for a lot of our clients, we would set a budget in December. It comes into place in January. We will then upload the budget into QuickBooks Online, and every single month we will track against that budget and how the organization is doing versus the budget. And at the end of March, we're 1 quarter through the year. So theoretically, our revenue should be at 25% of our annual budget. And if it isn't, it's really important to understand why. There's a variance column here. Looking at and understanding the variances, it's huge. It's the whole thing. And a lot of times there's variances due to timing, and that's fine. But it's really important to understand this is what we said we were going to do, and now this is what's actually happening. And so how do we pivot against that? And a lot of the groups that we're working with right now, obviously with the pandemic, we're really struggling with revenue. So by looking at this and tracking this monthly or even quarterly, it's if you're going to have a revenue shortfall, you can then look at your expenses and say, okay, so now what can I do in order to make up for some of my lost revenue? So it's very, very helpful to, like I said, to look at this monthly or quarterly and really understand variances and understand big variances. I would say 10% or more, and just understand maybe why we're missing targets, or even potentially why you're ahead. We also like to tell our clients to do a formal budget update 6 months into the year. You really kind of know what's going on, and also to forecast monthly. And a forecast, a budget was set at a point in time. A forecast is an ever-going and ever-changing budget update effectively. So it's constantly pivoting, constantly kind of saying, this is what we said we were going to do. Now we think this is what's going to happen. That's what a forecast is. And so for a lot of our clients, we're looking at this, we're looking at a lot of this, we're looking at all of this monthly. I do just want to, at a very high level, I do just want to mention that there are two different types of accounting. The accounting that I'm talking about here is accrual accounting. So there's cash accounting, which is very basic, which is how most small businesses will file tax returns. Cash accounting means that you record income when the cash physically comes in, and you record expenses when bills are actually paid. Accrual accounting, I would argue, is actually more accurate and my preferred way of managing books. Accrual accounting is income is booked when it is promised, not necessarily when the cash comes in, and expenses are booked when we know about them. So I would advise you to talk to a tax planner about which to use, because there's differences between tax planning and just general business management. But for business management purposes, I frequently recommend keeping the books on an accrual basis because it's a more accurate picture of what's happening. You can keep the books on an accrual basis for business planning and then convert them to a cash basis for filing taxes, which is actually what I do and what a lot of businesses will do. But to really manage your business, I would recommend keeping the books on an accrual basis. Nancy, is there a question?
Just that the variance, can you kind of go through each of those line items as to how they end up being 33.8% operating profit percentage?
Sure. So in this is an example of a very large business. And I do just want to be mindful of time because I have 8 minutes left. So the variances, so the sales, if I just really quickly, the sales will be roughly $712 million. The actuals are that. They're effectively coming under budget at this point in time on the sales by roughly $4 million, cost of goods sold by roughly $3 million. So at this point, they're actually under what they had thought they were. Their gross margin is slightly worse by roughly $1 million than what they had originally budgeted. So then you would come down here to the expense side of the equation, and you would say they're a bit worse on their gross margin, but on their expenses, they've actually made up for it a bit because their 56.5 million budgeted expenses, they actually came in better. So at the end of the day, the net impact of the loss in revenue and subsequently cost of goods sold, which was a benefit, they've been able to make up for it. And so the gross margins are actually higher than what was budgeted. And this is something that I will see frequently as well. And this all, like I said before, comes back to this whole concept of pivoting. So if you believe that you are going to have a shortfall on revenue, then the next best thing to do is to cut expenses, which is exactly what this organization did here.
Thank you. Okay.
So the financial statement, so the balance sheet. So once again, if a profit and loss statement is a very specific point in time, a balance sheet, this is an ongoing tally. So this is like since the beginning of time. And I would argue that this is where, without question, whenever we come into a new organization, this is where we find this is where you can find all of the mistakes in the books. So I think it's really important, and this comes back to the month-end close process, that at the end of every month, you need to understand every single balance that's sitting on your balance sheet. And I just very, very quickly, assets, that's effectively what you have. So this will consist of and own. So this will consist of cash, inventory, accounts receivable. So these items have been invoiced but not yet received. Your current assets, any fixed assets that you have are on the books. Liabilities, this will frequently be, a bank overdraft. Accounts payable is typically for small businesses, that's going to be your biggest liability, at least in the short term. Then you'll have, long-term liabilities, a mortgage, a loan, and then whatever's left over, that's your equity effectively. And equity and capital, those terms are used interchangeably. So the general accounting rule, assets equals liabilities plus owner's equity. Not to once again get too into the weeds, but if you're to take away anything, somebody needs to review the balance sheet at the, and we talked before, this is really a controller type level function. This would be part of the month-end close process, not for a bookkeeper, but somebody really does need to review a balance sheet on a monthly basis and make sure that the balances make sense and that you understand what every penny of each balance means. It's very helpful to look at a balance sheet versus the prior month or even the prior year, I've found. And once this is also functionality that can be pulled out of QuickBooks Online. And then my last slide for today, just 3 key financial metrics that we have been really harping on for businesses right now. It all comes down to cash. And so the number 1 metric that we tell people to really look at is the number of months cash on hand. And this is really your current cash balance divided by your average monthly operating expenses. So what I mean by average monthly operating expenses, your monthly payroll, your monthly rents, your monthly, all utilities, what have you. These would be your average monthly operating expenses. And then you would take that number, and theoretically, for the majority of businesses, we say it would be great. You could have 3 to 6 months of cash on hand. I would say that this is very industry specific and business specific. For an organization where a lot of your clients are on a retainer business and you're collecting your receivables quickly, this could even be 1 to 2 months of cash on hand, and that's fine. But I found that the organizations that have roughly 3 to 6 months of cash in the bank are those that have been able to weather the pandemic and weather any future financial storms. The percent receivables aged, we talked before about a collections process and accounts receivable. Just, you got to keep your receivables current. I like to say that 90% of what's outstanding should be less than 60 days. And if anything's over 60 days, you should really aggressively be going after it. So keeping the receivables tight and on track is really important. And then variances to budget. If you have any variances to your budget that are less than 10%, you really want to keep them under 10%. Anything over 10%, you really want to understand what's going on. So for example, if your payroll budget for the month of January was $1,000 and your payroll expense was actually $2,000, that's a variance to budget that's more than 10%. You're going to want to look at that. You're going to want to understand what happened. Was it timing? What happened? So I think really just focusing on these variances on a monthly basis is really important. And with that, I will just open it up to any final questions. And this is how you can please feel free to reach me.
The one question that we have, and please add them as we go on in the next few minutes, this presentation it's recording, So it will be on YouTube. We will not be sharing the slides to the presentation, but you can listen to it as many times as you want by finding it on the SCORE Northwest New Jersey YouTube channel, which will be posted by next week. Are there any other questions? Please put them in to the chat room, would be helpful. I just want to thank Amy. You gave us so many good tips and some information that we may not, be actually aware of. I wrote down a couple here, which is really to understand your expectations of what a bookkeeper can do for you versus a controller and versus maybe a CPA. I thought that was really informative. And then your idea of staying on top of your accounts receivable, that's really what's going to, help make your business successful in the short and the long term. So really stay on top of that. And then you gave us some good idea of some external resources that you should contemplate having rather than doing it yourself, such as payroll providers. There's many of them out there that you could employ. And then I loved your idea of a board of advisor or somebody not within the bookkeeping organization that is really looking at the month-end close and really helping you understand where you are on your financial statements. And then you also helped us really get to the bottom of what is a P&L, what is a balance sheet, what is a budget versus actual, which was excellent. And these are things that she's recommending, and I do as well, that you should be looking at them on a monthly basis. Your budget can be made up for the year and then review it every 6 months to see if you really have the right numbers in place. But on a monthly basis, go in and look at what is the performance of your business versus where you thought you would be. It will help you in your strategic performance as well in your planning there. We have a couple more questions, so hang on there, Amy.
No.
A lot of people are saying thank you. This is a very informative presentation. And the last question is, how do you use QuickBooks to do marketing aspects of a CRM?
You you wouldn't use QuickBooks to do the marketing aspects of the CRM. You would do QuickBooks to effectively, and I apologize if that was a miscommunication. You would use QuickBooks effectively, as a lot of our clients will use QuickBooks as their like marketing, as their database. So you would use you can use QuickBooks to track all of your client information, addresses, how much they've paid. You can use it to track all of that data. And for a lot of small businesses, that's absolutely fine. But you would use it as a data repository. That would be I believe that would be the extent of it. I actually do believe you can do tax notifications and tax thank you letter. You can do anything like that through QuickBooks, but it's really more of a data repository.
Okay. I don't see any more questions. Well, here's one. They always come in like this way. So right when I say there's none, there's always a few more. Where is the best way to learn more about how to get and then there's a lot of typos here. The most out of QuickBooks, I think, is what it's saying.
Yeah, that's a great question. QuickBooks, if you actually Google QuickBooks and QuickBooks Online, they offer lots of training. You can, very easily, you can actually become a QuickBooks certified pro advisor, which I think most of the people in my company have done. It's a couple $100 and it's a really in-depth training and it's fantastic. It's not time intensive. And it really teaches you all the different tricks of QuickBooks and QuickBooks Online. So that could be a way, but there's lots of QuickBooks trainings. I've taken a bunch at local universities through the years and they're out there. You just have to search. You could literally, it's a simple Google search.
Okay, and then we also plan on doing a QuickBook webinar either in July or August. I know it's a couple months away, but there are several SCORE chapters that do QuickBooks, and I think there might even be something in the SCORE National webinar database that you can go in and search for. But Amy's right, you could go to QuickBooks itself and get training. So with that, I think we might have one more. The question is, where do you find the SCORE Northwest New Jersey YouTube channel? You go to YouTube and you type in Northwest New Jersey and it will come up to the different webinars that we've recorded over the last probably 9 months we've been doing this. And if you have any questions, you can contact me. I'm at nancy.shea@scorevolunteer.org. I'd love to hear from you for either If you want to find a mentor, or if you'd love to be a member and be a mentor, please contact me. And with that, thank you, Amy. Excellent presentation. And
Thank you.
leave her information of her to find her if you have questions for her specifically. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Take care.
Yep, bye.